functional hamstring stretch and standing head to knee. These two poses, in my mind, are a great team. And so oftentimes a pose like standing head to knee, sometimes called pyramid, can feel awfully restrictive and as a result feel unsuccessful. Either people feel vulnerability and the need to lock the knee and know that that's not a good idea, or they feel as though the hamstrings are so limiting that they can't even get anywhere as far as a fold from the hip line goes. So we're first going to talk about functional hamstring stretch and how this could be a pose to warm up for standing head to knee, or just eliminate standing head to knee altogether, and then I'll show you how to approach standing head to knee safely and effectively for a great practice. So Lainey's going to turn sideways, and starting in mountain pose, just step back casually with one foot. So Lainey's going to step back with her left foot, so if I call out the left foot, just know that that also is the back foot. And I want you then to have yourself or your students check their back foot. So a lot of times when people step back, the foot has a turnout due to the restriction through the outer hip line. So make sure that the back outer edge of the foot is actually lined up with the outer edge of the mat. And then obviously the same thing with the front foot. Squaring the hips forward. If I was the teacher, I would just simply come behind Lainey and do exactly what she was doing and offer her a little bit more guidance with the hips. Nice neutral pelvis. And then making sure that my students or myself have a very aware kind of focal point or attention to the foot. So we want to stay grounded through the ball of the foot. That means the point behind the big toe and the point behind the pinky toe. When the calf and hamstring are restricted, especially on the outer leg line, you're going to find that that big toe tries to pick up or the whole foot curls up and all of your weight is on the outside edge of the foot. So we want to try to avoid that. When you stay grounded through the foot, what you also might find is a lot of new stretch. And so that's what we want. The goal is not the floor. The goal is never the floor. And in this case, the goal is not getting your nose to the knee, even though the pose is called standing head to knee. It's really about length from joint to joint. Heel to hip, and then hip to shoulder or hip to crown. We want to keep that length moving in opposite directions. So as she secures her foot, I would say number one, the most important focus is what that foot is doing. The next important part is going to be the hip fold on the front leg. So she's actually going to take her hand into her hip fold. So your hip fold's down kind of by where your pocket is. Your waistline would be up where like the top of your pants are. So just kind of recognizing the difference between those two. And as she exhales, the front leg is going to stay long and the back leg is going to bend. She's going to use the hand in the front hip to kind of draw that hip back even more as she bows forward. And then on the next exhalation, she's going to engage the glutes and use her glutes and hamstrings to bring herself up. Awesome. So she's going to repeat a couple times here as I talk and kind of use her as a focal point. As she squats down, again, she's using the hand in her front hip fold to increase the length of stretch on that front hamstring. So she's not just squatting back, and as a teacher looking, if she's not drawing that hip back, the hips will often kick out to what would be her right, because that's the front leg's hip. As far as the upper body goes, we want to have a really good awareness that the movement is actually coming from the hip. So when she's folding, if my elbow is her hip, we're not rounding in the spine to try to get closer to the floor. And then as we come back up, again, glutes and underbelly of the body is lifting us up. Here's another pose where we want to use the forklift underneath our body, glutes, pelvic floor, hamstrings, rather than the crane. The upper back, the neck, the mid back, we want to try to, again, come from the underside. As far as the back leg goes, when she bends the back knee, I think of it as like a 1800s bow kind of thing. We want to see if we can keep the knee pointing straight forward and not collapsing in. So that's a little bit of foot awareness actually. So when she bends the back knee, she really wants to think about keeping the arch lifted. How do you do that? It's actually that external rotation on the shin that we did way back in neutral alignment in that mountain pose video. And when we keep that spindling out, we get instant arch activation, and that's going to keep the knee tracking forward rather than dumping in. So just a little food for thought. And then again, underside of the body lifts her back up. Her body's nice and long. She could add some arms into this. I'm going to have her switch legs just so that she doesn't end up a little off. And actually, Lainey, if you want to face the camera. And so Lainey's going to face you now. Same thing. So her feet are on 2 water skis, not 1. I want to encourage you to, as a teacher, to take the time to set up your class properly for a pose like this and let them go for 2 minutes. Or let them go for a minute out of each leg and just call switch so that they can actually feel the pose. When we just try to jam stuff in on people and they don't even have a developing body awareness, not only are they going to leave confused, but they're not even going to get the full benefit of the posture. So Lainey's going to check the back heel, make sure it's aligned with the outer edge of the mat. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Align, align, align. There we go. And then this time, her arms are going to be in a locked and loaded position. And as she exhales, sits back into her hip, her arms are going to comb through her hair, reaching forward. Now that same length that she's sitting back with, especially with the front leg's hip, is shooting forward. So she has this great back length and strength. We call this strength and stretch simultaneously. Everything lifts back up, her arms pull back into retraction, and she lifts. And so again, exhale, sit back, reach forward, exhale. She can hold this inhale, stretch a little bit more. And then exhale, pull it back in. Now have Lainey turn back the other direction again here. So as she continues with this, back heel is lined up. Keep lining up. This is going to be something you're constantly telling people to do because I keep having you have to do it even with Lainey here. So outer edge of the foot lines up with the outer edge of the mat. Keep coming, keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. Awesome. Perfect. So keep that guy anchored down, and as she again bends the back knee, lengthens the front leg. If I'm really tight in the hamstrings, or tight in the back and don't have enough core support, what ends up happening is either the rib cage splays out or the arms end up kind of becoming chin jewelry and the arms are way down here. So if your arms are way down here and you're kind of hunched like a hunchback, this is not going to be the appropriate arm variation for you, no matter how much your mind wants it to be. You're just not there yet. Keep the arms back in retraction or keep the hands by the hips and really focus on length through the crown of the head. And then over time, you're going to find that you'll have that available length and strength, and a position like this is going to become way more beneficial. So it's not about just doing the pose anymore. It's about, am I using the right muscles and am I practicing effectively to get the desired result? This has to start to be as an awareness and in your forefront of practicing postures. And then again, coming back up. Awesome. Great job. All right, so now we're going to come into standing head to knee, which for me, in my eyes, as a teacher and as a student of yoga and functional movement, this is definitely a pose, I would say, that needs major warming up of the hamstrings, calves, and glutes. But also the pose we just practiced previously, the functional hamstring stretch, that pose is a great warm-up because you're working all the muscles for a posture like this. And as I said previously, you could eliminate standing head to knee. And quite honestly, I don't remember the last time I actually taught that pose in a class, but it definitely has some good fundamentals if you have the right pliability for the pose. So we're going to go over it right now. All right, so Lainey's going to step casually back into just kind of a casual standing stride, leg length stride. Outer edge of the foot lines up with the outer edge of the mat. Feet are hips distance. Remember, rule of thumb, I would rather have you with a wider stride than a more narrow stride so you don't feel like you're going to fall over. Keeping the back heel anchored down, at least for some length, she's going to bring her hands to her hip folds and square her hips forward again. Staying grounded through the ball of the foot. Now in this particular posture, if she really struggles grounding and as a result feels vulnerable in either locking the front knee or feels that she needs to excessively bend the knee, she could take a block and actually prop the ball of the foot up on the block. Come up, there you go. And that kind of flexed activation here is actually going to help tone the quad to help her get a little bit more reaction in that leg and feel less vulnerable in the knee. So just know that that is a variation that's totally appropriate, and it works equally as well in triangle. All right, so nice deep breath in here from the hip folds. Remember, your hips are down here, your waist is up here. As she hinges forward, she's going to draw the hip of the front leg back, moving only as far as she can keep her spine lengthening and extending. Just like the functional hamstring stretch, the more she grounds through the ball of the front foot, she's going to continuously draw the hip of the front leg back. So if she's like, wowza, that hamstring is tight, I would suggest going back to functional hamstring stretch. Now, she can bring her hands to her blocks, right underneath her shoulders if you kind of feel like this is a really new posture. I just need this direct support underneath my shoulder girdle. But if she can continue to engage the inner thighs, really activate, Sometimes I'll use the analogy of like hugging a piece of paper between the legs. And keeping that activation, she can walk her arms now as far forward as she can. She can either do exactly what she's doing right now, or she can actually keep her hands on the blocks and walk her arms out as far forward as they can go, keeping this really great length of the hip of the front leg pulling back and the arms reaching forward. And then just gently relaxing the head. Now she has this continuous length from the arch of the front foot, up the hamstring, around and over the glute, through the back, the underarm, and all the way to the wrist. So when we're talking full body stretch, we're talking full body stretch. To come out of this posture, she can stay exactly right here and just exhale, bend the front knee, and step up into forward fold or back into plank, excuse me, whatever would be appropriate for her. And then same thing, she can come to the other side and repeat the same process. And I like to give my students the option that if I show them functional hamstring stretch, we do it first, and then we come into a posture like this, and I give them the option to go back to functional hamstring stretch. What often happens is that the students that just really feel like this is not an appropriate posture for them, it's awesome as a teacher to see those students then going to choose that other posture. It means you've done your work, you've shown them the value of what you're doing, and they're no longer trying to jam their body into poses that just don't make sense for them, but rather trying to think about, okay, what is the value of this posture? And in these two postures here, it's to stretch the hamstring, stretch the glute, lengthen the lower back. Either one of these does that beautifully. Great job.